It's Valentine's Day, so this one
Aww.
is for the lovers. And we all know the classics: Titanic, Pretty Woman, Casablanca, which Variety recently ranked number one on its list of the greatest romantic movies of all time. But today, I want to make a case for Before Sunrise, because I think it's one of the greatest love stories ever told. And the reason might surprise you. I'm Antoinette, and this is Culture Alchemy, where we decode pop culture through the lens of psych, power, and relationships. And what makes Before Sunrise so powerful is that it captures something very rare: that ephemeral quality of connection, that lightning in a bottle feeling, the kind of romance that exists because it might never happen again. Variety's list ranked the Before trilogy, so that's Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight, at number 14 on its list of 50 greatest romantic films of all time. And I definitely agree. The trilogy deserves its flowers. But if we're talking the greatest love stories ever told, we have to start at the beginning. We have to start with Before Sunrise. It came out in 1995, which makes it 31 years old. I still can't get over that. And it still captivates new audiences today. The genius of Before Sunrise is its simplicity. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I can't even remember exactly when I first saw it. I just know I've seen it like a million times, and every time I rewatch it, I notice new layers. It ages like a fine wine, and honestly, in my mind, it's one of the best depictions of falling in love that we have in cinema. And I've got to give a shout out to my sapiosexuals out there, because if you love dialogue, this one is for you. But there's also one of the most powerful scenes in the whole movie that has zero dialogue. But more on that in a minute. So, a quick note here: there will be some light spoilers in this episode, but it's a trilogy, right? So the broad story arc is kind of out there. And what makes this movie so brilliant is that it isn't about what happens, it's how it happens. So, okay, so here's the premise: we have an American guy named Jesse, played by Ethan Hawke, and he meets a French woman named Céline, played by Julie Delphi, on a train in Europe. They talk, they connect, and Jesse convinces Céline to get off the train with him in Vienna. He has a flight the next morning back to the US, but of course he has no money for accommodation, so they just wander around Vienna all night, taking in the city and taking in each other. And then as the night progresses, their bond makes it all the more difficult to separate in the morning. That's the movie. No villains, no car chase, no plot twist, just two people walking and talking. It's one of the most romantic movies I've ever seen. And here's what I think is so special about it. So the genius, as I said it Before Sunrise, is really its simplicity. The simplicity works because they're fully present with each other. Like Ethan Hawke and Julie Delphi are basically carrying this movie completely for, I don't know, an hour and 45 minutes. It's resting completely on their chemistry and their conversation. And what makes it even more romantic is that the connection they have has this sort of ephemeral quality. It exists in one night, in one city, in one specific cultural moment. It's a love story that feels sacred because it could vanish. Now, a lot of romantic movies treat falling in love like it's a plot device. This one treats it like it's an experience. The dialogue feels so natural, like you're eavesdropping, you're a voyeur tagging along behind the couple. And one of my favorite things, it's hella awkward at times. Because the first chunk of the movie is basically a series of, okay, well, now what? And these are the moments that, left in the hands of another director or a more mainstream Hollywood production, would have been handled very differently. You know what I mean? This would have been where they would have cut the tension or the silence with just a little bit of fornication. Because it's like, okay, it's been 3 seconds since something has exploded. Where's the nudity? But Linklater is not that director. Okay. Linklater is like, hold my beer. He lets you sit in the silence. He lets you stew in the glance. He lets you marinate in all that energy. And then the characters do what people actually do in real life. They're like, okay, now what? Well, I guess we just keep walking. That's real. And Hollywood made it smoother, sexier. And this movie, the connection is often clumsy before it becomes magical, because you got to keep in mind too, both these characters are at a crossroad. Celine is returning to Paris, okay, coming out of a chapter. Jesse has just ended a relationship, heading back to the States. They're both in between versions of themselves, and they're both in their 20s, right? So this is a time where early 20s to boot. So they're still figuring out who they are. So it's kind of a magical moment, you know? And can we just talk about the fact that when they meet, they're both reading on a train? Okay, physical books on a train. Today, they'd be in a phone with their headphones on. The truth is, look, I got nothing against tech. In fact, I love tech. It's making it possible for me to connect with all of you today. But the truth of the matter is that, like, our phone kind of kills the accidental, where a physical book is a conversation starter. When I see someone reading a book, I look at the cover. I want to ask, like, hey, is it any good? A Kindle, no disrespect, you know? It's kind of like, are you reading Tolstoy or a spreadsheet? Are you checking your index funds? I don't know. Oh, this is not meant to be like a book talk, TED talk moment. Like, but those details in the film are so poignant to me because they feel exotic now in 2026. And that's the part of the film that still hits. It feels like a time capsule. And really, if you think about it, like 1995, there were no smartphones, uh, no texting, no Instagram, no Google, no easy way to track someone down. So if Jesse and Celine don't meet 6 months later, they disappear. That fragility, the ephemeral quality is what makes it so romantic. And today they would just simply exchange Instagram handles. They'd follow each other. Maybe they watch each other's stories. Maybe they DM. I mean, modern dating is kind of structured to minimize any risk, minimize loss. And so you can kind of keep somebody in your orbit through online activity. And you can do low effort check-ins through an emoji, a reaction, a quick DM. You can look someone up instantly and remove all mystery. And most people have a digital footprint. You can fact check their identity, their vibe, their friends, their history, everything. You couldn't do that in 95. When you met someone, it felt special because it kind of was. The rarity of that moment kind of created intensity. And I think that's part of why we're seeing this um, renaissance of everything analog again, right? So love letters, I heard, are making a comeback. Handwritten notes, people craving these tactile experiences because we're all a little strung out on screens, right? And we want something human again. And Before Sunrise captures that humanity so beautifully. It's a connection that might evaporate, but it still changes you. Now we got to talk about that listening booth scene because this is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, if not one of my favorite scenes in cinema. It's a bold statement, but it's absolutely true. There's no dialogue. It's just glances. And the detail that makes it even better, Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, they didn't know what song was going to play. Uh, Linklater didn't tell them because he wanted their reactions to be genuine. And you can see that. You can feel that. They're not acting, they're listening, and you can feel the electricity. Julie Delpy even said when she was filming, she was basically falling in love with Ethan Hawke in that moment. And I believe it because it's that kind of a scene. It's that powerful. And then, of course, you have Vienna, which is not just a backdrop. Vienna is almost like a third character. It's a city with its own personality, its own rhythm. It places people in their path, the poet, the psychic, the strangers they interact with. And the way that Jesse and Celine respond to those people, that cast of characters, tells us so much about them as people. It's really clever exposition without feeling like exposition. Vienna does what Tokyo does in Lost in Translation. It's not just scenery, it's a character. And honestly, Lost in Translation, one of the reasons why I eventually moved to Japan, it had a pull. Tokyo had a pull. And Vienna has that kind of pull here too. Just kind of cruising through the city with no agenda. Whereas today, now maybe they jump in an Uber and you lose that wandering quality. You lose that accidental, the exploration, the texture. And that ending, you see the empty locations in Vienna in the morning. Oh, makes it feel like the city is kind of holding their memories. It's really magical. In fact, I've never been to Vienna. Let me know if any of you have been to Vienna and what your experience was like. But I should check it out because it'll be really interesting to see that, um, and also to see the locations that they've been to as well. And now I've got to give credit where it's due. Much respect to Richard Linklater as the director. I also have to give a big shout out to Kim Kierzan, who wrote the screenplay. And of course, this is not just a relationship that begins creatively between Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy as they inhabit these characters over 3 decades and 3 movies in the trilogy, but also with Richard Linklater, who the three of them together, they just make magic. Their actual friendship outside the movie is so evident when you watch them on screen as well. And the trilogy, it's really a perfect trilogy. It answers three basic questions about a relationship that I think covers the span of one. One is, will they or won't they, of course, which is Before Sunrise. The sequel, which many people think is one of the best sequels ever made as well, too, Before Sunset, what if, right? And then Before Midnight really kind of says, okay, what now? And that is such a perfect way to map love across life stages. Honestly, if Linklater decides to ever revisit Jesse and Celine, I'd be down. I'd be there in a heartbeat. That's how deeply these characters really stick with you. So, for all those reasons, this is why I believe Before Sunrise is one of the greatest love stories ever told. It endears because it captures simplicity, presence, and that ephemeral quality of a connection that may not be built to last, but it changes you anyway. And so, Alchemist, I'd love to hear your take. Could a story like Before Sunrise unfold the same way today? Or is the way that we connect just fundamentally different? Drop your thoughts in the comments and I'll see you there. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to Culture Alchemy so you don't miss my next video. And until next time, alchemists, stay curious.